When I was a child, I often overheard my grandfather telling stories to the other adults. Stories about ghosts and other strange things that he couldn't explain. It was these stories that sparked my interest in the paranormal. Ever since then, I've read and watched every book and documentary on ghosts and unsolved mysteries that I could get my hands on. I like to think I'm fairly knowledgeable on the topic, but as much as I know, or at least think I know, there's still things that take me by surprise. After all, the world is full of strange stories of anomalies and unsolved paranormal mysteries. Some have logical, scientific explanations, while others just defy logic and all laws of science. So put the kettle on, sit back, and relax as we share and examine some local stories from right here in the Maritimes, as well as stories from around the world. Stories of the paranormal, the unexplained, and the just plain weird. I'm Raven, and welcome to Maritime Paranormal Chat. Welcome to another episode of Maritime Paranormal Chat. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Raven, and once again, we're creeping it real, podcasting from beautiful Prince Edward Island, Canada. And as always, if you have a creepy story or experience that you'd like to share, or if there's a famous story that you'd like to hear covered on this podcast series, then feel free to message me on my Facebook group page, Maritime Paranormal Chat, PEI. And don't forget that your real name will not be used unless you specifically say that it's okay to do so. Now, we have lots to talk about this episode because if you didn't join us last time, we were talking about déjà vu, which went a little longer than expected. Now, last time I hoped to have gotten into reincarnation, but unfortunately we ran out of time. So this episode will be about reincarnation, as the two pretty much go hand in hand. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what reincarnation is, or you're not familiar with it, Wikipedia describes it as, and I'm just reading this right off the Wikipedia website, reincarnation, also known as rebirth or transmigration, is for the most part the philosophical or religious concept that the non-physical essence of a living being begins a new life in a different physical form or body after biological death. In most beliefs involving reincarnation, the soul of a human being is immortal and does not disperse after the physical body has perished. Upon death, the soul merely becomes transmigrated into a newborn baby or an animal to continue its immortality. The term transmigration literally means the passing of a soul from one body to another after death. And before we continue, just want to welcome Igor back to the show. We missed you last time. It's good to have you back. And as always, Damian is joining us again. And are you still there, Damian?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I thought I lost you. Well, let's get right into this. Now, Igor, since you missed last episode on déjà vu, I'll start with you. Now, reincarnation. Are you a believer?
Yeah, I'm a believer.
And is there any particular reason why?
Well, honestly, I have feelings of, we have stated before, like I myself and a lot of other people have had feelings that they've been somewhere before. There's a feeling of I've done this before. And with some people, it's stronger in some people than it is with others. And I just strongly feel that it's a great possibility. And there's been a lot of scientific research done on it, and that supports it. And there's just so many stories out there that are actually interesting enough to listen to that sound like they may have some validity to them.
And that's an excellent point. We'll come back to that. Damian?
Well, there have been numerous instances of people, for example, who look like somebody else in a previous life who they said they were. There have been stories about people who said they fought in the Civil War, and there's evidence to back them up. There's records of these actual soldiers and stuff. And there's even been cases like in India of where a 5-year-old kid says, oh, these other people were my parents that lived over in this area of town, that lived over here and there, and I know all these other people, and they're able to name these other people that ever haven't met them. In fact, these kids live in another city.
Well, that's a really good point, and especially about the people that are very specific about who they claim to be reincarnated from. And I don't know if you guys ever watched Weird or What with William Shatner. And I think he did the same story on his new series called The Unexplained, where this guy named Jeffrey Keane, a middle-aged man, went to the battlefield at Gettysburg. And when he got there, almost immediately upon arriving, he said he went through a whole bunch of sudden and unbearable, off-the-wall emotions that he never felt before. He was totally overwhelmed. And he says he was then compelled to go to the gift shop. And while there, he noticed a book with a man on the cover who was one of the generals from the Civil War. And the general on the book looked almost identical to this guy. And from there on, whether or not this guy was telling the truth or not, I don't know. But this guy claims to be the reincarnation of this general. And it's very well documented. And you can watch that free on Tubi. I sounded like an ad there, I know, but it's really interesting. You can watch Weird or What, that episode, season 1. I forget which number it is, but the episode's called Life After Death, and you can watch that on Tubi, and it's pretty much the same thing on The Unexplained, which I don't have a clue where you can watch that. But anyway, what's your view on that, Igor?
Well, for starters, I think there's a strong connection between general looks and general similarities and things like that. I think that it's very coincidental that there's several pictures out of people that were 100 years ago, and they look almost identical to somebody who was born 50 or 60 years later or after this other person has died. And when they get to an age, an adult age, you can see the similarities, that they look almost identical. So, and it's funny that I just find it a coincidence that they're not living their lives at the same exact time. So how does that happen? Like, some of these similarities are just they're too accurate to dismiss. Like, they're just, like, you would almost think you're looking at the same person.
Well, if you check that episode, and I think it's just called Life After Death, but if you check that, or even Google it, I'm sure it'll come up on a Google search, Weird or What Life After Death episode, or do a search on Jeffrey Keane Reincarnation. I'm sure you'll find 100 hits. But you would think that these two people, the guy and the general, are the same person. And really, if nobody told you the difference, you'd probably think they were.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The similarities are like they're uncanny. They're so much alike. Like, it's almost like somebody took. It's like you went to Grandpa's old-fashioned photography and you just had yourself done for 100 years back, and that's what it looked like.
Right. And now, just to be the devil's advocate here, when I think of things like,
why you got to bring the devil into this?
Well, I know it's night and you have an issue with that, but when we're done, just watch about 10 comedies in a row and you should be fine. Anyway, just to be the bad guy here, so to speak, for me, when I think of things like this, I mean, don't get me wrong, I believe in reincarnation. I believe in the whole possibility of the authenticity of the people who have these claims. But for me, I think first and foremost, this is an adult, which means an adult's mind is going to be a little more prone to being corrupted. And what I mean by that is, what's to say that this guy went to this battlefield, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, I'm just throwing this out there as a possibility. What if this guy was at the battlefield, fell on his hands and knees because he had, I don't know, flash flu or something happened that he almost passed out, or he gets this sudden flood of emotions that overwhelms him. It really doesn't matter what happened to him, but the fact that something happened to him, or he says something happened to him, he's on his way out, goes to this gift shop, sees what he interprets, says the face of himself on the cover of this book, takes it home, reads it, the dollar signs flash in his eyes, and decides that he's going to go with this and do a reincarnation thing, see how much money he can make out of it. Next thing you know, he's on shows like Weird or What and The Unexplained. Not saying that it's true or fact, but it's a possibility. What do you guys think about that?
It is a possibility, but I find it funny that somebody who looks identical to, say, a general in a civil war in that particular location, what would that guy be doing there anyway if he wasn't drawn there? Do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're
Like, I
saying.
mean, what are the
100%.
what are the chances of this man being, like, why was he there at this location? What brought him there? That would be like me going to Italy and finding a picture of myself on a poster or something of someone from 100 years ago. And all of a sudden I'm there. Like, why? How did I get there? What brought me to that moment? Was there something that kind of pushed me in that direction? Or did I just happen to be a coincidence and I just happened to be in Italy at the time and I just happened to see the poster and now I'm going to milk it? I don't know. I just find it's an awful coincidence for someone to have those experiences and to look almost identical to somebody and to be in that same area. The coincidence are too much. It's too much.
So basically, regardless of how or why you think that you brought yourself there, or what your own plans were for going there, ultimately, something else drew you there. Right? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Because, like, I mean, yeah.
I'll buy that.
Because if you're being let's assume that I'm reincarnated and I was a general in the war or whatever. Let's just say that. And say I for whatever reason I would have those thoughts in my head that I wouldn't be aware of, where battles that I was in or entanglements that I was in or experiences that I've had. And who's to say if I'm just looking on the internet or I'm just looking at a travel guide and saying, hey, you know what? This place, for whatever reason, that looks interesting. I'm drawn to that. I find that really interesting. I want to go see it. And then when I get there, all of a sudden, I see this picture. I think that's totally possible. I think that's totally capable of happening. 100%. Because I think that this whole, I don't want to use the word spirit or soul or anything like that, because we don't know what it is. We don't know what we're dealing with. But I honestly believe that if we are reincarnated and there's something in there and a soul from before, and it wants to go back to where it is, and it doesn't matter whether it wants to stay there, but it wants to revisit its past life, that would be a way of doing that. Like seeing that, and like if you're coming across it on a pamphlet or a newscast or something, and then all of a sudden, hey, for some reason, I'd like to see that. Why do we all of a sudden get interested in some of these things?
Well, that's a really good point. What do you think about that, Damian?
I totally agree. And it's also possible in cases where people are experiencing it in civil war, are they picking up psychic impressions of, all the trauma and stuff that these soldiers and generals experienced, They might not be reincarnations, but they're picking up psychic experiences, and they experience it almost as if they were this person. That's
because the closer they get to that location, the stronger that these feelings are going to be, and hence the flash flu or headaches or something like that. That could be like something could be triggering that because you're so close to the area where you used to be in another body in another time, and all of a sudden that your soul, or once again, I don't know what word to use for that, your soul or spirit or whatever it is, your aura, I don't know, but when it's there, it would have to be at a peak. Your emotion would have to be at a peak. It would have to be at a really strong point. And when you're there, and to trigger things, like to start to trigger emotion and the sudden sickness and the sudden headaches and the sudden pains and aches, and I think it's 100% possible. 100%.
Like in a place like, for example, like Gettysburg, where 50,000-60,000 people died, there's probably going to be a lot of psychic trauma and grief and sadness, all of this emotion, because so many people fought and died there.
There'll be thousands of other souls there.
Even a strong psychic impression of all the trauma stuff that went on there, and you're able to detect it and feel it, But maybe you were one of these soldiers, maybe you weren't, but maybe you're experiencing the psychic impressions of what was there. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's different shows that I've watched, different documentaries on Gettysburg, a lot of people report that there's so much that you can feel. Like you said, it was a very highly emotional, highly traumatic event where so many people lost their lives in a very short amount of time. And people have reported they could actually feel that in the air.
People said the same thing about the concentration camps like Auschwitz. They felt exactly the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
And my mother went down to Argentina with her husband back in 1993 because he went down there for work. And my mom went by a place and she got really extremely negative impressions. She didn't know why. And it was a neighborhood. And she asked somebody there about it. And he said, well, back then it was ruled by, Argentina was ruled by a dictator called Galtieri. And apparently the place where she was, a lot of people were killed there because, they were killed like execution style by the government because they were opponents of the regime or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now, when you say that, I think of these things and what we're talking about, it almost gives me the sense that whether or not you're actually reincarnated from one of these souls who lost their lives there or not, if you're even the least bit sensitive to that type of energy that is in the air, then I mean, you're going to feel something anyway, regardless. And maybe that's somebody trying to come through you.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just exactly what we're talking about. It's a past life drawing you back to where you lost your old life.
And maybe, and once again, I'm just going to throw this out there. Maybe this whole thing of reincarnation is just a soul trying to come out through a living body. And it just happened to choose you at that time. Like, we don't know. We don't have enough information.
It's interesting that you mention that because I have somewhere, I wouldn't know where to find it, but I recorded back in the old VHS days, I recorded a documentary where there was a Civil War reenactor. This is actually what he did for a living. He dressed up in Civil War soldiers' uniforms and reenacted the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, one day he went to the battlefield with his family, just to do the family thing and the touristy thing, and he said he felt like the spirit of a Civil War soldier tried to take over his body. Not to possess him or anything evil like that, but he felt the spirit wanted to use him to interact with other people through him to get a message out, because he felt the spirit had no idea that the Civil War was actually even over yet. Like the spirit wanted to use him as some sort of a conduit. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like as if
I can tell you that in my mom's case, what happened in Argentina, it couldn't have been a past life in her case because this dictatorship happened during her lifetime, right?
Right.
I think it's back in power, like in the 70s or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, something else that you mentioned earlier, Damian, an Indian girl.
Mm-hmm.
What was that about?
Indian girl, could you refresh my memory?
You mentioned about the Gettysburg, and you said something about I think you said something about an Indian girl who was reincarnated.
Oh no, a girl from India.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, yeah. What happened? Actually, yeah, it was the Indian girl. Apparently, when she was 5 years old, she lived in some city in India, and she's telling her parents about her past life, about who her other parents were, her brothers and sisters, her friends, all these people she knew in this neighborhood and this other city. And she kept talking about it all the time. So eventually her parents went to this other city and they met these people who this girl was always talking about. And all these people, and they started talking about, what happened, in her life and, this, that, and the other thing. And this girl was able to, she knew her way around the neighborhood, even though she'd never been there before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that too. People can go somewhere and they'll be where they've never been before, and it's not so much it's a feeling of remembering being there, but it's like they know exactly where they're going. They know exactly what's happening. They're familiar with the surroundings, and it's just they're so in tune to everything, and they don't know why. They can't explain it.
Now, there was one documentary that I watched back in the early 90s about a 4-year-old East Indian girl who, as soon as she learned how to talk, started telling her parents about her past life in a town that she's never been, and how she was murdered by her husband, who was a very prominent doctor in the community. And her recollection of her past life and the murder were so vivid and detailed that it actually led to the arrest and conviction of her husband, who later confessed to the murder.
Wow, that's incredible.
Now, I don't know how true that is, because this was back in the early 1990s. I think the documentary was called Walking After Midnight, but don't quote me on that. But I mean, this happened before the internet, and it's really hard to say how much of that was true, because I can't even find the video anymore. Like, I search YouTube, and I've been looking all week, and I can't find it anywhere. But just knowing that that story is out there and that it possibly happened just like that. And there's several other stories like that from India and all over the world. And just the possibility, again, that those are true is incredible. What are your guys' views on that?
Well, like nowadays, you can find out everything on the internet pretty well. You can look up old, murder stories and stuff. So now you probably have a little bit more, take it with more of a grain of salt. But like decades ago, it would be far more believable just because of the world we're in, Well,
yeah, and a lot of these stories involving kids, I mean, the more credible ones, happened before the internet, which means they wouldn't have had access to all this information that if I wanted, say, for instance, if I had a 5-year-old child that I wanted to instill in his mind that he lived a past life as somebody else, I wouldn't be able to get all this information on somebody as easily 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Which, like you said, makes it a little more credible for people back then to come forward with these stories.
Right.
What do you think about that?
On the same token, like, why would I care, for example, why would I care about a murder that happened, say, in Oshawa, Ontario, of somebody who I didn't even know,
Exactly.
Unless I really believed I was there, or I knew any of these people, why would I actually care about it, If I thought I had a past life in Oshawa decades ago, and I thought about something about this murder, I knew something about it, why would I say anything about it if I didn't even know any of these people or even that the murder even happened, right? So.
Right. Well, I think if somebody was going to do a con with something like that, I think it would probably just come down to how easily it would be to get information on someone.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, again, if I had a 3-year-old child and I decided to start grooming him or her, I could start putting it in their head that they used to be Joe Schmo from Idaho who died 20 years ago. I can find somebody's life story on whatever website online, and that's opposed to finding out information about somebody more famous. It's more believable if it's somebody that nobody's ever heard of. You know what I mean?
Right. True enough.
Yeah. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. What do you think of that, Igor?
No, I agree 100%. 100%.
Now, I was looking, here's something interesting. I was looking on a site called www.noetic.org. Very interesting site, by the way. They say there have been many reported signs of reincarnation over the years, and some commonly described phenomena. If you are somebody or you know somebody who believes they may have been reincarnated, or if they have a reincarnated child who's coming forward with the following characteristics, then there's a good chance the more of these things that are evident in their claims, the bigger the possibility is that they're actually reincarnated. If they exhibit signs of déjà vu, if you or your child exhibit signs of déjà vu, and since you missed the last episode on déjà vu, Igor, I should have asked you at the start of this one, have you ever experienced déjà vu?
I have.
Igor,
nothing super strong or anything, just a feeling that this has happened before, or I've done this before, or I've been here before, or it's just a feeling that's a very feeling of familiarity to whatever it is, or wherever you are. And
is there any particular déjà vu instance where it stands out above any of the other ones?
No, no, it's not something I've experienced often. It's happened a couple of times, but nothing that's nothing that stood out.
Okay,
For me, it's always been it's just a feeling. Like I've done this before, or not, and it's not super strong or anything. It's just this seems familiar. This seems like I've either been here or I've done this, but it hasn't been a super strong feeling or anything like that. It's just enough to know that it's there. Just enough to know that I've done like I've had this experience.
Well, I'll tell you, it drives me absolutely nuts when I run into somebody or I see somebody and I know that I don't know them. I know I don't. But something tells me that I should. It's like we've met, but I know we haven't. Do you know what I mean? And it's just for that couple of seconds and then it's gone.
No, I've had that before. I've had that before. You see someone and they just strike you as very, very familiar, but it's like you've never seen them, or something they do, or something they say, or some kind of whatever, whether it's an action or words or something that might trigger something or set you off. But yeah, no, I felt that before.
Now, Damian was telling us last episode that he experiences deja vu quite often.
Yes, I do. One time when I was in 2005, when I went on my very first cruise, I was on one of the cruise stops was a little island called St. Martin. And the island is half French and half Dutch. It's owned by 2 European countries, right? And when I get off the ship, to get a taxi driver to go up to the beach on the northern French side of the island. And I swear to God, this taxi driver, she's a black lady in her 40s, right? I had the strangest feeling, almost like she was my mother. She wasn't. I never met this woman before. I had no idea who she was. I never had this feeling with any taxi driver before, right? And we were talking for a bit. She just drove and showed me around the island and stuff. But, I swear to God, it was like, I knew her as my mother before or something. It was the weirdest thing. Like, even when I stopped to get gas and I offered to buy her a drink, I never do that with a taxi driver before ever, right? So,
right.
Once again, it goes back to that whole thing of what drew you to that particular cab? Like, what brought you to that particular cab? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, nothing in particular, but, I just...
No, but... Yeah, but something like what, like how, if that person brought up those feelings in you, familiarity of a mother or something kind of like a father or mother figure, like how did you end up with that particular person as a cab driver? Like I don't think things like that are I don't think that I don't think it's coincidence. I think everything's set in stone, and I think that was meant to happen, and you were drawn there.
Yeah,
well, it's interesting that because last segment we were talking about how out of all the millions of people in the world, billions of people in the world, that we only have a small number that we involve in our personal circle of close friends, if you will.
Yeah.
And your spouse. I mean, who's to say that? I mean, unless you're in a very miserable relationship. But then again, I mean, that could be the exact same thing under a totally different set of criteria. I think you're drawn to certain people, and there's certain people in your life for a reason. And who's to say that, who's to say that you weren't best friends or married to somebody for the past 10, 15 lives?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%.
I think that's very possible.
Just think of it this way. There's over 8 billion people in the world. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
8 billion people. What are the chances of you coming across somebody that would set those kinds of feelings off? What are the chances? Like, honestly.
Almost
exactly.
Done.
Exactly. So everything, I fully believe that everything is set in stone. It's something is always driving you somewhere or pulling you somewhere or pushing you towards something. And like 8 billion people, and you get the cab driver that for whatever reason, reminds you of your mother, or have strong feelings that it's your mother.
Yeah.
Like things like that, like 8 billion people, like that's not a tiny number.
Yeah.
No, I totally get that. And I like to believe that. Yes.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
I knew that I could really trust this woman. Like, she drove me around the island to give me a tour, and she was really good to me. But I felt like this son-mother connection with her from the very beginning, even before she started driving the cab. It was the weirdest thing.
And that could go on the other side of the coin too. I mean, there's some people that I run into that I don't know, but you just get this really, really bad vibe from.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly have no idea why. And maybe, again, like maybe you knew them from a different time, a different life, and things weren't so good. And maybe this is who this person is internally, so to speak.
They may not have the same body you remember them in, or they may not have the same face that you remember seeing them in. Or get this, listen to this now. Maybe your soul and their soul have met.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the bodies. Know where I'm going with this?
Well, I think so.
Who's to say that my soul isn't a reincarnation of somebody from 1924? Okay?
Yeah.
I got a soul. My soul's been reincarnated from somebody who was born in 1924, died in 80s. I don't know, whenever they died. And say there's someone out there who's maybe, let's just say it was his mother. We'll go with the mother thing here. And the soul of his mother is in another body. Who's to say that they aren't drawn to each other, or they aren't somehow at some point pulled to each other, even if it's just for a brief moment, just to reconnect, just to, set those vibes off. I'm spitballing here, but it may not be. When you come across somebody and you feel strong feelings for them, good or bad, and you're saying, well, I met you before. Maybe you haven't. Maybe the soul that's in you has. And maybe the soul that's in this other person's feeling the same damn way. And maybe it's these two souls are connected somehow. Not necessarily the bodies, but the bodies are tricked or meant to think that, I know this person. No, you don't.
Right.
My soul knows this person. I don't.
Right. And that's where the term soul mates come from. Maybe your soul were intertwined. Like I said, I mean, maybe the past 10 lives.
But yeah, but I mean, there's people that you can come across that, like you said, and you just take one look at them. You just take one look at them, or you get within a certain range of them, and it's like, that's bad news.
Oh yeah.
Like that is just, I'm getting out of here. Like, I want nothing to do with this person. And then there's a total 180-degree turn there, where you could meet someone for an hour and you could feel like you've known them all your life, and you'd be sharing your whole intimate stories with.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
So
I believe that. And I think personally, and again, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I mean, I think that that's probably a very good possibility why, when your marriage is really, really good and lasts, that maybe that's why. It's not just somebody you meet that you're compatible with. Maybe you could take that a step further and say, these are authentically soulmates. We've been married before.
Yeah.
Like some people who meet other people, it's like, oh, well, we only talked for 5 minutes, and it's like, I feel like I've known this person forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not on the other extreme, what you said about hating people. Like, when I was in high school, when I first went there in PEI, there were a group of girls, they bullied me, but they hated me from the very start, and I didn't like them either. I guess their energy just didn't vibe for some reason. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's just teenage crap. But they absolutely hated me, and I have absolutely no idea why. And even when I ran into them as adults, there's still this animosity. It's like, I don't know where it came from, but it could be just teenage crap, or maybe there's past life stuff. I don't know. Wow. But it's like they had deep-rooted hatred, and I have absolutely no idea where it came from,
That's the thing. We don't know. And sometimes we just have to pass it off as thinking and believing that it's just teenagers being teenagers.
Yeah. That could be part of it, but there could be something deeper too. It's like,
I don't dismiss anything. when it comes to that stuff. Not a thing.
Yeah.
Because anything's possible.
Yep. I agree.
One of the other characteristics that this site mentions, if you think you or your child is reincarnated from somebody else, is the idea of child prodigies. For those of you listening who don't know what a prodigy is, a child prodigy is a person under the age of 10 who produces meaningful work in some domain at the level of an adult expert. The term also applied more broadly to describe young people who are extraordinarily talented in some field. And in regards to reincarnation, say you think that you are reincarnated from somebody who was a carpenter, and you're exhibiting very, very good carpentry skills by the age of 8.
What about, okay, I know a really good example of something like that is you take someone who is 6 years old and they exhibit, like to say, for example, they hop on the piano.
Exactly.
They're given two or three lessons, and boom, they just ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're top of their game.
Exactly.
So
with no underlying conditions either, like savant or anything else, then yeah, I think that's very possible. That's where that's coming from.
Well, two excellent examples of that are Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Michael Jackson,
Yeah. Exactly.
And Mozart especially, like Mozart, his very first musical composition was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. He wrote that when he was 2 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Another characteristic is birthmarks. Birthmarks consistent with injuries, piercings, or other physical markers from a past life, or even the marks from ropes, indents, or breathing tubes where somebody may have been restrained, held captive, or sick in a hospital. What do you guys think of that?
No, I believe it. I believe it's true. I believe it can happen.
Pregnancy dreams, where the mother-to-be gets informed about the child's past identity. So what I'm gathering from that is that if you're pregnant and you're starting to have dreams that your child was, I don't know, maybe a painter or a dancer from a past life, that could be who your child is being reincarnated from.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard any stories like that, but then again, I haven't really read a whole lot of stories.
No, I haven't heard a lot like that either. That's kind of new for me.
Another one was spontaneous involuntary memories arising in a waking state or dreams. If you're dreaming about a past life, then there could be something to that, especially if it's in addition to any of these other characteristics. Here's an interesting one. Pregnant women craving foods that the deceased person liked. Now, I think the only way you'd really know that is if you knew the person that you think you're being reincarnated from.
Are you basically saying that if you were pregnant and you get a craving for a pickle and mayonnaise sandwich, that it is the reincarnated child's former self looking for a snack?
Well, possibly.
Yeah, it's possible certain characteristics get carried over life after life after life,
Yeah, so I mean, if you, let's say that your grandfather passed away when you were 3 or 4, and his favorite thing to eat was your pickle and mayonnaise sandwich, and you're pregnant. I mean, that one food item wouldn't really constitute as solid, indisputable proof that you're having a child that's being reincarnated from your grandfather. But I mean, if you have a whole bunch of other food items that you're craving that he loved that people don't normally crave, like maybe he liked pastrami and oatmeal, and maybe you're craving that, stuff like that. Who knows? It's possible. I mean, especially if you have it combined with other characteristics in this list. How about this one? They died a very sudden and violent death in their past life. And the last thing was...
But wait, well, go back up for a second.
What?
When you talk about someone who's being reincarnated, like, who says that it has to be somebody who died a violent death or somebody who had a
it's
tragic...
not. It's just a very common theme that
yeah,
people
okay.
it's just... I think it's just one of the more profound characteristics that people exhibit when they claim to be reincarnated from somebody else. Usually it's the result of a tragedy like a plane crash, a murder, or a suicide, something along that line. But anyway, we are going to take a quick break, but don't go away, because just like our lives in the endless cycle of reincarnation, Maritime Paranormal Chat will be back. Hey guys, don't forget to check out the new paranormal TV series originating out of Nova Scotia called Creepy Cape Breton. This first season features 6 episodes on folklore, legends, and the unexplained. Join director and writer Dawn Wells, a Mi'kmaq filmmaker from Membertou First Nation, as she takes you on an unforgettable investigative journey into the unexplained and paranormal tales of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Everything from ghosts and strange creatures to UFO sightings. Right now you can watch this series on 5TV Channel 1 and the 5TV app exclusively through Bell TV Canada. The following is the audio trailer for Creepy Cape Breton, and for the full effect, don't forget to watch the full trailer complete with video on YouTube.
My name is Dawn Wells. My mission is to collect stories of ghosts and the unexplained from the people of Cape Breton Island.
He was just staring in the window. I started screaming.
Were you a soldier?
They call it Gugues, they call it Sabe, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. There's many names.
Only on 5TV1, Channel 1, and the 5TV app.
So we're back with Maritime Paranormal Chat, and we are joined by a latecomer, Ivar, who was supposed to be on the other night, but due to technical difficulties, couldn't make it on. So nonetheless, he's here. Better late than never. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
And really quick, Ivar, what's your view on reincarnation?
When I hear reincarnation, I believe it could, like, and I said to, I'm sorry, I forget your name, dude, but we were talking, just him and I, when you were gone and the other guy wasn't here, but we were talking, like, reincarnation to me means like you could be a beetle or a dog or a person. You know, like it goes from like you could live one day or you could live 100 years, right?
Right.
But the whole point of reincarnation is like, well, reincarnation is biblical. So, I mean, it's like, it's not evolution.
No.
I mean, you evolve into something else, and like that's evolution, where you are one thing and then you eventually become something else. But reincarnation is like you're this and then you're brought back to something else. So that's totally different. I mean, and then of course with reincarnation, that brings on the biblical stuff where you actually think there's a God. Like, what is a God? I mean, like, let's be honest. Okay, the master of the universe, the creator. But I mean, you know, we can, if you get into religion, oh my God, we'd be here all night.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And when you said about reincarnation coming back as something else, Damian, you probably know more about this than I would. There's certain religions, and I can't remember which one, Hinduism or one of the East Indian religions, where what you get reincarnated in depends on your quality of life that you've led when you were alive. So, for instance, well, I don't believe it either, but I mean, if for instance, you were a criminal, you were a murderer, then you might come back as a frog.
Right.
A frog.
I've read a lot of different books about reincarnation, and most of them say that, going to a lower life form or be an animal, that doesn't happen. If you're human, you get reincarnated as a human. You might have different circumstances in this lifetime, but you're never a dog or an insect or a bird or anything. They have different souls of their own.
The point is, though, you still have a life. And if you're a rapist or murderer or a child molester, you shouldn't even exist as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, that's true, too.
You shouldn't have a chance of life at all.
Yep.
Right, definitely. But you should ask yourselves, what was it that led them down that path in some cases in the first place? Where they victimized themselves,
Right.
That's where it sounds ridiculous, right? It's like, what? Okay, I raped a 3-year-old little girl, but I'm going to come back as a frog. Yeah, that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that brings me to mind when and I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but do you remember Adam Sandler, Little Nicky, when they had Adolf Hitler in hell?
Oh, God, yeah.
He said, it's 4:00, time for Hitler's coconut up the ass.
No, pineapple.
Oh, pineapple, right.
Pineapple. And he had to go pick out the biggest pineapple.
Knock, knock.
Yes, Jimmy.
Don't forget, you're shoving a pineapple up Hitler's ass at 4 p.m.
Right, Cinnamon.
No matter how many times they see or hear that, it's still funny. Anyways, there's also a religion in East India, and I can't remember the name of it, but they have something called the wheel of, or cycle of life, or the wheel of rebirths.
I've heard of that, yeah.
And basically, you constantly get reborn into something better, closer to God, and your ultimate goal is to reach the end of the cycle where you actually get to heaven. And I can't remember if you actually become a god or if you just get to the point where you
I heard that too. I heard that too. You get 7, I think it's 7 phases. And when you hit the 7th phase, your last stop is heaven. And depending on how successful you are and how good of a person you are, depends on how higher up the rung you are. Like, if, for instance, if you led a mediocre life, you were a thief, you were a rapist, a murderer, you'd be on the bottom of the pack. And when you were born in the next life, you'd be a little bit better, and you may have just been a thief, or you may have just been something, I don't know. And then the next life, you could have been something else, and then it slowly gets better. By the time you get to the 7th stage, you've reached a peak, which once you pass away on your 7th stage, then you're at that point where you deserve to go to heaven. But it starts out at a very low position, and it just builds its way up.
Problem is, you're not going to be a god if you go to heaven, because guess what? There's already a god there.
No, I didn't say you're going to be a god, but it's just you get up there and you get to that point where you deserve to get into heaven.
Well, I think that's where the term nirvana came from.
Yeah, and each life you live is one step closer, and you just keep bettering yourself, and then you get to that point where
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that.
I'll be honest with you. I heard of it before, but I totally forgot about it until you just brought it up.
Yeah.
Well, it's called moksha, the freedom from the wheel of rebirths, and that's where they want what they want to achieve. And I believe the process is called samsara. And from what I remember, is that some people in that faith actually leave their families to join monks to live this life of perfection, so they can reach this state.
Of course, it's perfection, because they can keep doing bad and still come out okay, which is totally. It's almost like the hijackers of 9/11 thinking that they're going to get like 100 slaves and virgins, and they're going to be gods by killing themselves and killing other innocent people, which is total bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's like, come on, seriously?
Oh, I think you're thinking of radical Islam, Ivar.
Yeah. But I think in the case of Buddhism, they're trying to reach like a Buddhist enlightenment, like equivalent to a Buddha, by doing all this stuff.
Right,
like,
right. Doing evil to be good, which is totally the opposite.
Like, everybody gets 70 virgins in the afterlife if they commit she had, that's a total lie, I think, because they're going to find themselves, a nasty little surprise when they get there, what's going to happen to them. So,
again, you're thinking of radical Islam, and that's just an excuse to kill people, I think.
That's all that is.
Sure it is.
Of course.
But
now, how can you get to that point, right? Like, damn.
Now, Damian, when you talk about enlightenment a minute ago, is that the same as nirvana?
Yeah, that's Nirvana. Nirvana
pretty
is the
much.
ultimate state in Buddhism where you reach ultimate enlightenment, like Buddha.
You're the king.
Yeah, so
that's
this is ridiculous. King of chaos. That's about it.
Well, in just a minute,
we're going to look at 12 mind-blowing facts from scientists who study reincarnation.
But first, I just want to give a shout out to
the fine folks at the Happy Bistro in Summerside, which is a new restaurant in the area. Have any of you guys been there yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. Like it's a fried chicken place. And we went there on Christmas Eve.
Where is it located?
It's at the end of Cedar Street, just before Cedar meets Water.
Oh, okay. Well, that used to be another place before that, right?
Was it?
The Chinese chef that used to run that place had a few little tables in there.
Okay. Well, this is run by...
I'm not 100% sure. Sorry.
This place is actually run by a family from the Philippines.
Right.
We ordered there Christmas Eve, and the food was incredible, and it wasn't overly priced. But I mean, when I go to work,
it depends how much you make, right?
well, that's true too. But I mean, when I'm in Charlottetown and when we go out to eat, if we don't go to KFC, we go to, and they are super pricey. But I mean, they're also really good. They serve full pieces.
You want to know the best place in Charlottetown? Papa Joe's. Go to Papa Joe's if you want to have some nice, wholesome, good-feeling meals, and with a decent price.
Avenue, right?
Go to Papa Joe's. Yeah, the old Ponderosa.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah,
that place
I've been
is
there
awesome.
Before. I like that place. Anyway, so this is actually owned by a family from the Philippines. So keep in mind that they have a lot of Philippine-themed menu items as well. But we just went there basically for the fried chicken and fries, and it was nothing short of delicious. So welcome to Summerside, Happy Bistro, and all the best in your new endeavor. And we will definitely be going back. So anybody who likes fried chicken, by all means, try it out. Full pieces, not cut in half like some places, which I won't mention these names.
I was just going to say the name, but whatever.
Anyways, getting back to reincarnation.
When I was researching this show, I was looking at a site called mattmixa.com. And some of these sites are really obscure with the names. I don't know why, but anyway, I'll list the links on our Facebook group page, Maritime Paranormal Chat, PEI. And this is 12 mind-blowing facts from scientists who study reincarnation. And
apparently these are statistical facts, things they found in the research. So don't get excited. This isn't the tell-all, end-all evidence to support and basically prove reincarnation. So
is there proof of... Yeah, exactly. They say, is there proof of reincarnation? Reputable medical and academic professionals, including a team of researchers at the University of Virginia School of Medicine's Division of Perceptual Studies, have been studying the science of reincarnation for nearly half a century. They're seeking scientific answers to the question, is reincarnation real? After investigating thousands of stories of people who claim to remember a past life, their meticulous research has uncovered these 12 staggering facts. And I just want to say before I list these off is that I've probably looked at about 10 to 15 sites on reincarnation. Nobody seems to offer any real, or they don't really want to go in the direction of offering any real explanation from a medical standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, as to why people experience these things. And nobody comes right out and says it in any direct way, but it seems like the medical / scientific community is leaning towards the authenticity of reincarnation. nobody's coming right out and saying it's not true, but they seem to be leaning toward the possibility that, yeah, these cases, for the most part, are authentic, and there's some very authentic sounding cases.
Well, I would say this much. The brain is only used about, what, 10, 20%, if at the best. There's like 80% unused, apparently, from what we know. And can you imagine what the thought process could be if it was explored even more and accentuated into something where a human could actually use that other 80%, what we could be capable of, and actually know? Now, the neutrons are firing. You all hear about this. I don't want to get off topic, but the white lights, the tunnel of light, when people are dying, right? They see the tunnel, they see the light, right?
Right.
Your neurons are firing in your brain because we don't want to die. The brain's trying to survive. And it's like people go, oh, I remember when I was like 1 year old, 2 years old, or remember things I remembered before, or situations and all these flashbacks and everything. Well, it's because your neurons are firing because they're trying to survive and they're trying to keep you alive. The brain's trying to live, right? That's a perfect explanation of why these things happen, for the most part, from a scientific point of view.
For near-death experiences, you mean?
Yes, and even what you just talked about as far as reincarnation and stuff goes, because, well, I mean, you look, I've heard stories of a little boy and thinking, well, I used to be this, king in Sweden, and I had servants and whatever, and blah, blah, blah. But it crosses over, right? It goes into like the almost deja vu, neurons firing, and like you mentioned about reincarnation.
Right.
It kind of goes hand in hand in a way if you really think about it. It's like it's all one time lapse.
Right. Well, one of the characteristics,
it crosses over into other issues too. That's the problem.
And that was one of the main characteristics of people who claim to be reincarnated, is they have these episodes of deja vu, and they're very frequent and very graphic. And usually they're from kids under the age of 5.
Yeah. Which also could mean that if you believe in the string theory or multiple universes from Einstein, which means if you have deja vu and have experienced other life-altering experiences, might mean that you've actually already lived them before in another place, another time frame.
Exactly. What do you guys think about that, Igor and Damian?
No, I agree. I agree 100%.
But science, for example, has never explained how activity in the brain produces consciousness. Is it possible that we do have a spiritual self that exists after death? It may be possible that we're experiencing things in our brain, but is there not potentially a spirit essence that we don't yet understand?
Well,
dreams. What about dreams? Dreams are almost like a deja vu. I mean, sometimes you dream about stuff. You actually feel like you're there. You could be like half asleep and still conscious halfway, when you feel like you're actually doing it.
I'm going to throw this in here for a second. Your brain cannot make things up. When you dream or you see things or you whatever, when you dream, it is something that your brain has already seen before. It is something
you've experienced.
When you see a face in your dream, you've seen it before somewhere, because your brain cannot create a memory that doesn't exist. So when you're dreaming, they're pulling that image from somewhere. You've seen it. It may be thrown into a scenario, but every person that's in your dream, your mind has seen it. You have physically seen it. Now, you look at this point here that I'm trying to get at, like what I'm getting at here.
Hence the multiple universe.
It doesn't necessarily mean that person that your brain has seen is from this lifetime.
Right.
You see where I'm going with this? Like
from before or after.
Yeah. Chances are it's before, because if it's you wouldn't have experienced that. Yeah, you haven't experienced before or after yet. But if your soul is reincarnated and you're in a new body, you still have those memories are there. They're just in a different file folder. They're just tucked away somewhere.
What is a soul, though?
Well, that's a totally different. Like I said earlier when you weren't here, I said we'll call it a soul just for the sake of calling it something.
Right. Consciousness.
Yeah, perfect consciousness. Whether you're in a body from now or you were in one 100 years ago, all those memories are still in that. I think they travel with that soul, and when they go in, when you're reincarnated, it's just they're tucked away somewhere. You don't know how to access them. It's like a filing cabinet that's locked. You can't get into it, but it's there. All that information is in there, but your brain knows it's there. So when you're dreaming, the brain can pull out any information whatsoever. And you could sit there and say, what the hell was that? Oh man, these people, I'd never seen them before. They could have been some faces that you saw 100 years ago or 20 years ago.
I agree.
Your brain cannot create an image that it never saw. It can't do it.
Sorry. I've had dreams about the future which end up coming into fruition. It's happened to me more than once, and like
wouldn't that be more of a premonition, though?
Sorry?
Wouldn't that be more of a premonition, though?
Yeah. And maybe that's possible too.
But what's the difference between a premonition and deja vu?
No, a premonition is something that's going to happen.
Well, but you think it's going to happen. Doesn't that happen when you have deja vu? It's like almost to the point where it's like, I've done this before. I know I have. I know I've been here before.
Yeah, but that's
a premonition. Yeah, now that I say it though, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's like
a premonition. Look at a premonition as kind of like a vision.
Just before a deja vu.
Yeah.
I know that some Native American tribes, they take dreams very seriously. They think it's more important than reality.
Oh, yes.
They think that dreams have to be obeyed. They see it as like divine omens or something, or spiritual omens. Like if you saw this in the dream, this is what needs to happen, right? So.
Well, they read a lot more into their dreams and interpret them a lot more.
Yeah.
But again, if we're talking about reincarnation, like I mentioned this before, like it depends on how you view it and what you think reincarnation actually is, whether you come back as a mosquito that lives 2 weeks and dies, or you're a human being that lives to be 100 years old. That's the thing. Like what is in between that, right?
Right.
Yeah, then all those things you just mentioned go out the door, really.
Yeah.
Because a mosquito has no purpose except for living, dying, and breeding, and they're done feeding, and that's it. Humans, you get into other complex situations, then yes, the what you're saying is right, or could be, but then you get down to the nitty gritty of it all. Reincarnation could mean, like I said, either a mosquito or a lucky human being that lives to be 100 years old, and then things just go at the door.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think for the most part, reincarnation is a cultural / religious thing.
Depending on what your religion is, and like, okay, I'm coming back as a mother from 200 years ago, or, whatever. But yes, to me, reincarnation is you just coming back as a different being on the planet Earth.
Right.
Simple as that.
Right.
no matter what it is.
Right. But I mean, like in North America, I'm leaving out multiculturalism when I say North America. Traditionally, North American views on reincarnation is basically you die, you get reincarnated into another person.
Okay.
You know
That's
what I mean?
different,
As
yes.
opposed to like other cultures that have different
Just
beliefs.
a being or
Yeah.
an insect or something,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Because I was always told growing up by my well, not necessarily my parents, but different people have said jokingly, you know, if you don't behave, you're going to come back as a frog or a housefly in your next
Right.
life, so to speak. And I thought they were really serious until I got older and learned more about reincarnation and what it meant and all that other stuff. But
well, like if you ate an apple seed, then an apple would grow in your tummy.
Exactly.
Or if you ate a watermelon seed, then that would grow in your stomach. Or if you swallowed chewing gum, it would stick to your ribs.
Yeah.
Yes, and chewing gum was made out of spiders' eggs.
But yes, you're right.
Yeah. So, but 12 staggering facts
about reincarnation
that have actually been discovered by scientists. And the first one being is that 33% of Americans believe in reincarnation. Obviously, this is an American study.
Only 33? I'm surprised about that.
The Pew Research Center conducted a study on New Age beliefs and found that 1/3 of Americans believe they would be reborn in another body after death. Interestingly, they found that women were almost 1.5 times more likely to hold this belief than men.
Childbirth.
Yeah. And
that's why.
Probably why. That's probably exactly why.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to add to that one?
I can see where they got those numbers from. Yeah.
Okay. Damian?
Yeah, like I say, I would tend to agree with that. So
Okay. Number 2, 65% more people believe in reincarnation now compared to 20 years ago. According to a Gallup poll, and unfortunately they don't give any dates for this, which I wish they would, but according to a Gallup poll, reincarnation appears to be making a comeback. Pun intended.
Social media, internet.
Yeah.
You guys didn't
and
get my joke.
I'm actually surprised
people have more access to information now. They've got more.
Yeah.
They can access studies. They can access stories. They can access experiences. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, the internet was just coming out.
Yeah, how do you think I know what I'm talking about most of the time?
There you go. Exactly. And nobody got my joke. Reincarnation appears to be making a comeback.
Yeah, right. I'm making a comeback.
Jesus.
Coming back, yeah.
36% of Catholics believe in reincarnation.
Oh my God.
that makes sense too, because Catholics and Christians are their hardcore religion. Yeah. They're one of
I'm Catholic, but guess what? I'm not.
No, but in under general consensus,
I get
you. They're very strong in their beliefs, and I could see that too.
Yep.
They say reincarnation is central to the beliefs of many Eastern religions, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, but the concept is also more popular among Christians than many may realize. According to a study conducted by the Pew Research Center, 1 in 4 Protestants and 1 in every 3 Catholics believe their soul will return in another body after death, even though such an idea is not part of their religion's official doctrine. Now, here's an interesting point. 70% of people who remember a past life remember dying a violent or a natural death. We touched on that a little bit earlier on. How do you guys feel about that?
Once again, when you got something traumatic or something that's more memorable or something like that's more painful, you're going to remember. It's just like, if you get a cut in your finger or you break your arm, what are you gonna feel the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence either when you look at that statistic and you think of people who experience hauntings in places like crime scenes, emergency ward hospitals, stuff like that, where people died a very violent, sudden death. I don't think that's a coincidence where people experience that energy there.
Yeah.
Because I think
Depends
that,
on
I
the
don't know,
individual, I guess.
like you said, I think it just leaves more of an imprint on your experience. And in that situation, it's been found by a guy named Dr. Jim Tucker. He says the vast majority of cases he investigated under those circumstances involved people who remembered their past lives as men and not women.
Okay, don't even go there.
Yeah.
We got enough problems in the world today without going there.
Could that possibly be the reason why some people are gay or some people?
I'm going to bring up the transgender thing, and that just yeah.
Let's just move on.
Yeah. That's probably a good idea.
Okay, well, anyway, the reasoning behind that is because it's more likely that men would die a violent death because they're usually the ones that have the dangerous job and fight in the wars.
Well, the warriors, the soldiers, yeah. And women are the caregivers.
Right. And 9% of people who remember a past life exhibit an unusual skill related to that former life. We touched on that a little bit earlier. So
yeah, it's your child prodigies and your children that are like all of a sudden they're geniuses.
And
like
fathers that bring up their child, their children.
Yeah.
Go the next one.
So number 6, 35% of people who remember dying accidentally in a past life have an extreme fear of dying the same way again. There's a show I watch called Ghostly Encounters on Haunt TV, and one guy had this intense fear of water, and he could never understand why all his life. And he went to see somebody, and I can't remember how that unfolded, but he found that he was, or got the idea somehow that he was reincarnated from a child who actually drowned in this lake in front of this cabin. So I think there might be something to that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it's very possible, you know.
Ivar?
Well, look, I will just say this much. It's funny you brought that up. I've had dreams of water for a very, very long time. And
isn't that a wet dream?
Not to that point.
Technically it is, yeah.
But I'll be honest, I've had a couple of those over my lifetime. I think we all have, whether you admit it or not. But point of fact is that I've always had these dreams where I'm trying to get to the top of the water, like into the sunset. I'm swimming to the top. I wake up and I'm gasping for air.
Wow.
I never get to the top. That's just one. The other one is like tidal waves coming towards Prince Edward Island. And I'm talking 200-300 feet high. And we're like, the sirens are going. I'm trying to get to high ground, can never get there.
Right.
Others where I'm walking in knee-deep water and there's a flood that's happened and I'm trying to get to refuge and everything else. And always these constant dreams of water and flooding and destruction. And it's creepy. It's weird and it's scary, when it's like you wake up and it's like, damn, like, whoa, what the hell was that? But yes, just to reiterate on what you were just saying, that's what I've experienced as far as dreams go anyway.
Has the idea or the theme of a water-based threat manifested itself in any other ways besides dreams?
The funny thing is, I love water. When I go to the beach, I've got to go in the water at least 2 or 3 times, and I go in over my head. So it's like I'm not scared of going out there and swimming at Thunder Cove or wherever. But the funny thing is, in my dreams, I was like, I can never get to the top. There's always flooding. There's like massive waves coming towards me, and it's strange. It's really crazy.
Maybe you're having a premonition.
Who knows? But I'm telling you, I wake up. And not especially, but the ones that where I'm underwater trying to get to the top and I never get there. but I wake up and I'm gasping for air. So in my sleep, I'm actually holding my breath because I'm underwater. It's pretty freaky.
No offense, but I'll never go on a boat with you.
Right?
Yeah. 26% of people who remember a past life demonstrate
some other form of ESP. Now, it's interesting that would be the next one, considering what you just said.
I've never experienced anything other than my life, but I do remember, and believe me, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I remember being 1.5 years old.
Really?
I don't.
Yeah.
My earliest memory is like around 5.
I don't remember what happened to me last week.
My earliest memory is when I was 2 years old.
That's pretty good.
I honestly don't think I remember what my earliest memory is. I really don't. I think it would.
I remember sitting at my grandmother's and grandfather's place in Easter, and I was born in March of 72, and this was I think March of 73. So like, yeah, a year. And I remember, and I have the picture actually, but I remember sitting on the couch with my little bucket of Easter stuff that my grandparents and my mom got me, and dumping it out, and my grandmother taking a picture of me and seeing the flash, and I have that actual picture here. I remember that.
Wow.
Crazy. I'm lucky, I guess, but I mean, it's weird. But I've also heard of people unbelievably talking about how they remember coming out of the birth canal.
Oh. I've heard that too. Some people say they remember that.
That's crazy.
Number 8, 20% of people who remember a past life believe they'd lived as a deceased family member.
No, it's possible that family members can reincarnate, and maybe not all family members, but some, in multiple lives. It's very possible. Because some people are far more connected to some family members than others, right? So.
And I think, too, that, this is just my own personal opinion. I think that if you have a really close-knit family,
there's going to be more of a bond there if reincarnation is a thing, like carrying into the next life. I think there's going to be a closer bond there when you do eventually die and into the next life. It would make sense to me that you're going to be, the better chance that you're going to be closer to the people that you're closest with. Do you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah,
it does.
I've never experienced that, but yeah, I think what you're saying, it's agreeable for sure.
Well, there's a doctor on this site, they say, psychiatrist Dr. Brian Weiss hypothesized that we may have what's called, how you have a soul mate. Well, he says that we may have what's called a soul family, a cluster of spirits that we are drawn to life after life. And Ivar, I think this is...
Yeah, where are they now?
Before you got here, like, it's interesting that this came up because before you came on the show, we were talking earlier about how out of all the millions of people in the world, we seem to be attracted to a very, very small few that we end up keeping in our lives, whether it's a spouse or a best friend or a small circle of friends that we end up keeping all our lives.
Corey.
Yeah. So very possible.
Oh, yeah.
Number 9, 58% of people who report remembering drowning to death in a past life often report an extreme fear of water.
As previously mentioned, scientists have documented many cases of people with phobias that appear to stem from remembering past lives. I think it'd be really interesting if you were to go to a hypnotist, and I don't mean one of those ones that come to the bar every couple of months, but I mean an actual therapeutic hypnotist, and see if anything comes out of your session as to why you have these recurring dreams of water-related
impending doom, for lack of a better term.
Have you ever considered that?
Well, the thing is, I'm not afraid of the water.
Have you guys ever heard of the actress Natalie Wood?
Yes.
Apparently she had a lifelong fear of dark water. And when she died, she's on Robert Whitener's boat. She's also, Christopher what's his name? He was on the Dead Zone.
Christopher Walken.
Walken, yeah. Apparently, she was scared of dark water her whole life. She wouldn't get into the water whenever she was in her movies and whatnot. And she died in the water. Then she fell off the boat and died in dark water. But she was scared of it her whole life, apparently. And apparently, she also knew when she's 10 years old that she's going to marry Robert Wagner when she saw him walking by her when she was a child. And sure enough, she did,
Yeah, premonitions. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting if you were to go under hypnosis and see if they come up with anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That might be a scary project.
Well, I don't know if I would want to do it for myself because, like you said, I'd be too scared. I'm a pussy when it comes to that.
The funny thing is, I love water. Like, I love the beach. Like I said, I have to go in at least 2 or 3 times. Like, I need to do that. But in my dreams, it's a different animal.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. Like, if you really love going in water, then there's got to be a connection there why you keep having this recurring dream where there's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, and I'm still not going in a boat with you. Sorry.
We need a bigger boat.
There you go. Number 10, 23% of people who remember a past life believe they once lived as a different gender. In many of these cases, which the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies has thoroughly investigated and coded, the individual strongly associated with the gender of their remembered past life personality. Perhaps this is evidence for a universal soul that can express itself as any or all genders, regardless of the body's anatomical gender. I don't think that's very profound or important as the other points that come up here. But number 11...
Could be to some people, but not for us, I guess.
That's true. Kind of a boring point, I think. Number 11, 20% of people who remembered
a past life also remembered something between the time from death and rebirth.
And basically what they mean is sometimes people report having witnessed the funeral of their own past life identity, and a few have even accurately provided details that seemed impossible for them to have ever known or found out about, while others have described a more ethereal experience in a sort of spirit realm while in between lifetimes. What do you guys think of that?
That's a very interesting concept.
And
so almost like being on your deathbed or coming in from an accident and you are pronounced dead, and then you see yourself floating above the hospital bed kind of thing, right?
I've heard
from a
stories about
past
that
life.
before.
Yeah. So I guess that is different.
And according to this doctor, one boy claimed he'd met a distant relative who died many years before while in this realm, waiting to be reborn. While in another case, a child claimed he had the choice of choosing his mother while watching her on vacation in Hawaii more than a year before the woman ever became pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got nothing on that.
Number 12, 2% of people who remember a past life can accurately describe their previous funeral. What do you guys think of that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 25 out of 1,100, that's not very big, but even 2 or even 1 case where somebody can accurately describe their funeral, like that's...
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, just the fact that it happens once, like, I mean, that's pretty crazy. Yeah. So anyway, those are accepted as basically actual things that have been discovered about reincarnation.
Now let's get to the real things. Aliens, UFOs, and Bigfoot.
Well, we're gonna have a lot of fun with Bigfoot and all this other stuff
on future episodes. But right now, we're all out of time for this episode of Maritime Paranormal Chat. I want to thank Igor, Ivar, and as always, Damian for joining me today. And next time, don't forget to tune in, as I'll have a very special guest on the show. Dawn Wells of the new paranormal documentary TV show Creepy Cape Breton will be here. You heard me talking about her and the new show the last couple of episodes. Well, now you can hear her story straight from her. And believe me, she's one of the most interesting people I've ever had the privilege of speaking to, so you definitely don't want to miss that. And don't forget, you can watch Creepy Cape Breton anytime on the Vibe TV app exclusively through Bell TV Canada. That's next time on Maritime Paranormal Chat. Until then, this is Raven signing off with Igor, Ivar, and Damian, reminding you to creep it real, and we'll scare you later. Take care.
Don't forget that if you have a paranormal, unexplained, or just plain weird story or experience that you'd like to share, or if there's a famous story or event that you want to hear covered on this podcast series, you can direct message me on Maritime Paranormal Chat, PEI's Facebook group page. I'd love to hear your story and possibly use it on a future episode. Keep in mind that your real name won't be used unless you say that it's okay to do so.